Maya, when we think about improvements to the Delaware River and specifically to the lower Delaware, where have we seen the biggest strides and what would you say are the biggest challenges that remain?
Well, I think most people have heard the story of the Delaware River and how in the 40s, 50s, and 60s it was so polluted. We had a 20-mile oxygen dead zone in the Philadelphia Camden reach of the river, top to bottom, bank to bank. You could smell the river from a plane, and when ships came up, their engines would be clogged because of the amount of contamination or pollution in the river. And a lot of those problems were due to nutrient pollution, really, from sewage treatment plants. And so through environmental activism and laws at the state level, the federal level, and through the regional Delaware River Basin Commission, we made a lot of progress and cleaned up a lot of that pollution, put in place needed technologies to help keep that sewage pollution and nutrient pollution out of the river. And so we don't have an oxygen dead zone anymore, but we have an oxygen sag. We don't have dock workers coming to the docks and getting sick and even dying from contamination on the river. And yet there are still concerns about people literally, swimming in the water and recreating in a way that they get submerged in the water. So that's an area where we've had dramatic progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. I think when we just look overall at what needs to happen for the Delaware River, we really need our state, federal, and regional Delaware River Basin Commission to be much more proactive in not just trying to clean up the harm from the past, but saying no to new threats to our Delaware River, like toxic fracking wastewater, liquefied natural gas export facilities, dredging and deepening projects, damaging development projects. If we can start saying no to things that will inflict harm, we will avoid contamination and devastation that will cost us down the line.
When you think about those threats, Maya, are there species that are native to this part of the river in particular that are at heightened danger?
There are a lot of species that really are suffering because of pollution, contamination, inappropriate dredging, and development projects. And one of the most iconic that I have literally for my entire 30-year career as the Delaware Riverkeeper been working to save is the Delaware River's genetically unique population of Atlantic sturgeon. This is a population of Atlantic sturgeon that only exists in our beautiful Delaware River. And because of all of these harms to the river, again, pollution, dredging, devastation to their habitat, and the lack of oxygen necessary at the levels to support the procreation, the propagation, and the thriving of the species, at this point, we have less than 250 spawning adults left. That's all. Now, I didn't mention, part of the problem was historically we had overharvesting of the sturgeon, but that stopped decades ago. And so they should have been allowed to come back. But because of all of these other inappropriate actions and activities allowed by government action, or a failure of government action to be proactive about things like restoring the oxygen levels necessary to properly support the sturgeon, we have so few sturgeon left that this is actually the species of Atlantic sturgeon, and amongst many species literally worldwide that are considered to be most at peril from extinction.
So when you see and hear of the river being touted as a success story, which largely it is, where does your mind go in terms of just how much more we need to do to truly clean it up and to truly mitigate? You mentioned development, fracking. Despite bans, the waste can still make its way in. What would you see as next steps?
Well, so, we're sort of at this tipping point. We've made a lot of progress. There's more to be done, but there are new threats coming down the pipe. So yes, we kept fracking out of our watershed through a lot of hard work and activism. And yet right now there is a proposal to allow toxic fracking wastewater to come into our watershed in ways that would allow it to get into the environment and potentially into our waterways. There are new development projects, industrial projects that are being proposed all the time. So, I mean, I think what we really need is we need our government officials to be proactive about cleanup, but also, again, about preventing future harm and using their authority to be mindful of how we can stop the harms before they start. And I guess the myriad of options are just too great.
Yeah.
It really depends on where you are in the watershed, what that threat is, whether we're talking about in the upper reaches, development of things like warehousing, or in the lower reaches when we're talking about a lack of oxygen due to all kinds of pollution inputs that are still going into the river.
You know, I think a lot of folks maybe take for granted where it's at now if they haven't been around to see just what it was like decades ago and all that had to be done. What do you think isn't talked about when it comes to the watershed and how far it's come? What's not been a part of the conversation that you think needs to be so that folks keep in mind just how vital a resource it is?
I mean, I think truly there's a lot of great conversation about the Delaware River, but it really depends on where you're at, on what what you are most aware of or not. I think the story of the Atlantic sturgeon, such an iconic species that's been around since the time of the dinosaurs, but may not survive the time of people. Most people aren't aware of that particular story, but when they hear it, they become alarmed and they want to know, what is the cause? What is the problem? How can we restore the sturgeon? And then we have to have this complicated conversation about all these different pathways of harm and therefore multiple pathways for solution. So I think it really is more, it's not that we're not having those conversations, but we're not having them broadly enough. And I think that also we are not recognizing that the Delaware River is an intimate part of many people's lives. And for low-income communities, communities of color, it is a source of recreation. It is a source of food for them. It is the place that they can go and enjoy nature and get extra food for their plate through fishing for multiple species in the river. And yet engaging in some of those activities because of ongoing pollution can be a real threat to those communities. And so I think another part of the conversation we need to be bringing to the forefront is being more mindful about how important true environmental justice is for our river, for our region, and for our communities, and that we stop disproportionately impacting communities of color and low-income communities through our current system of laws, which frankly embrace environmental racism, don't actually do enough to prevent it.
Maya Van Rossum, Delaware Riverkeeper, thank you so much as always for your insight on this.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.